is it starting now? There we go. Welcome, everyone. It's a great Thursday night here, February 20th. I say that to just delay time and figure out what I'm doing here. I need to go pin this to the top of my profile, as all of you guys should be doing. Let's go pin these lives to the top of your profile. Hit the retweet button. I'm going to do this right now. There we go.
There it is.
I got to tell you, Kyle Seraphin is my guest tonight, and you are controversial. Does anybody like you? Does anyone like you? I like you.
Mm-hmm.
There goes. I'm going to be called a deep state FBI plant because I just
some people do, but they have to keep it on the DL. I'm like a covert like.
So here's how we're going to start this, because I know that you have haters out there. You have a recent hater. I want to go through a tweet.
I forgot about that guy, to be fair. Like, that's my favorite thing, that some people are like, oh, I got to go back and circle and talk shit about Kyle Seraphin. And I'm like, who are you again? Okay,
listen. I got to bring this up because and I'm stirring the pot here. But you're here. And I want to how dare I, because if I don't do this, then people will say that I'm a cuck and I'm a terrible person and I didn't ask real questions and I'm, in the wait, did I just screw up? I did.
You did go back.
And I'm in the oh my God.
Oh, now you're
there's our private DMs. Oh my God.
So much exposure.
Oh my God. All right.
This is actually my secret skill, is to elicit this information from you.
You're like, I know a guy who doesn't know how to use the internet.
Right.
And we can get Tim, we can figure him out here. All right, there we go.
We're going to expose him.
We're going to expose Tim with the internet. All right, so I want to talk about this because this guy is one of a few people who don't like you. Clandestine, what's this thing here? Clandestine. Blue check clandestine. And I can't wait for him to call me every name in the book.
Yes.
But I'm going to go through this point by point because I have seen so much hate on you. Again, I know you personally. I don't. I like to think I know you personally. I don't think that you're a deep stater. I don't think that you're an FBI plant. I know that you're not. I mean, I would imagine they would have kept you around. It probably pays better to be a part of the FBI instead of losing your security clearance.
Usually.
I mean, it's just one of those things. But
I did better last year than I did at the FBI, actually, being on my own. So.
Well, there you go.
That's the best revenge there is living well.
You deep state plant. So I want to get through this. By the way, hi to everybody in the chat. What's up? Donnie, hi. Aloha. Hawaii. What's going on? Hey.
I have this. I have a deep-seated not love for Hawaii. I'm serious.
Not much there. It's expensive too, right?
It's expensive, and it's not America, and it's really weird. And I have a brother that's lived there for a very long time, so I've spent time there with my brother back in the day. But I just feel like it's just one of the most backwards places in America. And then I've lived in really backwards places. I lived in New Mexico, which is truly backwards, and I love New Mexico, and I love New Mexicans. But I don't like Hawaiians just by default, and I don't like Hawaii.
Wow, that's
Hawaii. I like to say Hawaii so that I can get really irritated at myself when I say it that way.
That is, I don't like Australians. I've never met an intelligent Australian. So
I think Australians are hilarious, and I love Crocodile Dundee. So we'll just agree to disagree.
All right. Well, I'll go on that one. Maybe this guy clandestine's right about you.
He might be.
I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go through this point by point because I want you. Because again, if I don't,
I'll fact check it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if I don't do this, when I bring you on here, then people are going to call me names, and that's the worst thing that could happen to you on the internet is name calling.
It actually, it can cause physical damage.
I am. Tim Young laughed when he should have interrogated him more. It doesn't matter, by the way. It does not matter if you present hardcore evidence against any of these claims, by the way. It doesn't matter what the fuck I say here.
Correct.
I'm already a bad person.
Well, yeah, because look, we're living in a time of idolatry. Let's get serious for 1 second. We're living in a time of real idolatry. But people don't realize that it is idolatry. They have hero worship syndromes that happens all the time. And it doesn't matter if you have a hero worship of Donald Trump, which I do not, but I don't dislike Donald Trump. I've never met Donald Trump. He seems really likable to people that love him and that are near to him and people that I know that love him. And I'm like, okay, fine. But that doesn't mean that I agree with anything or everything, or I have to agree with anything he says, because I'm like a grown-up and I grew up in the 90s. And I just remember when I have friends that I don't agree with. My best buddy in the world, who if he was a woman, even though he would be an ugly woman, no doubt he would be an ugly woman. If he had been a woman, I always joke that if he had been, I would have married him because his personality is so perfectly fit to mine. And we don't agree on politics at all. In fact, he told me that he thought we should spend every penny that it was necessary to support the Ukrainians and be willing to send his kids to war there. And I was like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. I can't believe we believe. Like, how did we grow up together and think that? How did you come out thinking that? And you know what? We're still buddies. He texted me this morning and he was like, "Hey, how you doing, bud? Like, is that vote coming up in the Senate? Like, we don't agree on politics at all, but we're grown-ups and we don't have to because
that's a crazy concept, Kyle.
I know. It's like people have taken this era, and this is where the idolatry goes. They affix their beliefs to certain people. And they make those people shining standard bearers of the belief. And then if you don't believe everything that I do, you have now betrayed me, despite the fact that we don't even know each other. And so people regularly will hit me up on and this is why living on X is just, it's surreal. I don't think that people are real. You're like, your words on a screen to me, most of you, and your pixels. And so you're just figments of my imagination, which is why I'm such an asshole half the time. I just think it's funny. I just want to say funny things that make me laugh, because I'm not going to take you seriously because I don't know you. But if we were in person, you wouldn't be mad at me. I promise.
Well, or people
you wouldn't be,
or people wouldn't mouth off at you either because they don't.
No, we would both be polite and appropriate, and we would talk about things that are normal, like we'd be talking about kids.
I had a full article. I didn't realize that I had at one point I do a bit on this when I do my longer form stand up stuff and whatever in my talks. I was in a celebrity feud with Cardi B at one point. I had no idea because I had tweeted years ago. I was taking a dump and I tweeted. Like the lyrics to the lyrics to WAP are more acceptable in schools than the Dr. Seuss books. And
probably true.
That is true. And she quote tweeted me 3 times and went off and the whole thing. And there were articles written about it. And this whole
I couldn't even pick Cardi B out of a lineup. That's how irrelevant she is to like real people's lives. But
you sound like a racist.
I am. Yeah, for sure.
They
obviously.
all look alike, don't they, Kyle? You racist. Anyway.
I mean, does she have a different color skin? Is she like a mocha?
She has a large butt.
Huh. Not against that. I'm not categorically against that sort of thing.
And she speaks like
trash
like trash from New York. Yeah.
She speaks like Jasmine Crockett wants to speak. I call Jasmine Crockett dollar store Cardi B, but someone told me that she's actually more like a Dollar Tree Cardi B because Cardi B is already dollar store, and I'm sure that's really, really clever, but I just don't actually understand the distinction between. They both seem trashy.
I said she wants to turn Congress into a Waffle House when she was yelling at Nancy Mason.
No, how dare you take the... okay, I put my foot down on that. I love Waffle House, and how dare you? How dare you? I would fight you for that. That's the one thing. I love Waffle House. Waffle House is my jam.
I do too, but I can't say it's not ghetto.
It's not ghetto where I go. It's full of lovely people, wonderful people that work hard and make brilliant double waffles, scattered, smothered, covered.
I just want to say when people go to Waffle House, they should tip very well. That's my big thing.
I did a cross country journey with my girls when we left the Washington D.C. area. So I was working for the bureau. We got transferred out to New Mexico, and I drove my babies, my 2 oldest girls, who were 2.5 and like almost 4 at the time. And we drove all the way across the country, and every morning for breakfast we got Waffle House, and they were in heaven. They thought it was the best thing in the world because they were out with dad. And we're like in a minivan that was full of a lot of ammunition, all of my firearms that I couldn't ship, that I couldn't figure out how to put on the government moving truck, and a German Shepherd. And like, it was the weirdest trip I've ever done. I'm like savage beard, cute little tiny toddler girls, an arsenal of weapons, like 50,000 rounds of ammunition, and like $10,000 cash in a backpack because I sold like an RV before I left. So I was like I look like a complete psychopath. I'm confident of it. And we did Waffle House on every stop.
What? Oh, do they not have Waffle House in Hawaii?
No, it's regional. There's places that don't have it at all.
I have probably the worst Waffle House order. I do a waffle and 3 poached eggs on it.
That's not acceptable. Yeah,
it's not an acceptable.
That's like real posh sounding.
It is very.
People will spit it. Like, you better watch them make that waffle because they'll spit in it. I would spit in it. I'd spit in it if I heard you order it. I'd lean over and spit in it. I'd be like, this guy, get out of here.
I actually stopped ordering it because a few times when I ordered poached eggs, they were like, what?
I one time ran 6 miles in the dark after hiking 15 miles all day with a 70-pound pack. And I actually ran 6 more miles and crossed a pretty nasty stream that had filled up with rainwater and whatnot to get to my truck to drive to go pick up my buddies at the trailhead because he promised me a Waffle House. Seriously, 15 miles with 70 pounds going up and down mountains in Arkansas. And he was like, dude, if you go get the truck right now, I'm smoked. I will straight up buy you whatever you want at Waffle House, which is a real cheap buy.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm in. I'm freaking in. And I just sprinted the rest of the way.
I just think, honestly, and this is my true opinion here. I think the best of us work at Waffle House. Usually, it's folks who have been through something or otherwise that are just trying to turn their lives around and are working. I mean, they work hard as shit at a
If
Waffle
you
House.
if you ever want to go to an awesome Waffle House, you can go to the one that is right off base at Camp Lejeune. It's in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And the ladies that work there are all married to Marines, so they're all saints, and or maybe not, but the ones that work there seem to be saintish. Just the sweetest, nicest people talking about their guy that they love who's serving America, who may or may not be deployed. There's some real outstanding characters, and I learned more about the Waffle House system. There are parts of FEMA that are actually based on Waffle House's rating of how bad things are going to get. Do you know that they actually rate hurricanes and disasters, and
No.
Waffle House is the sort of the barometer for that?
No.
Waffle House has menus that will be able to function on everything from water, power, electric, everything's there, like food is stocked up, all the way down to nothing, like no refrigeration, no electric power. They have a menu for like, we have nothing. And they'll actually do it. And they scale it down. And then they decide if Waffle House closes in some places, then there are government buildings that go like, okay, we got to get out of here. They actually decide based on that. And I learned that in North Carolina from these ladies who were on the Waffle House emergency response team. They actually have a 747 with supplies that they can fly into a disaster area, and they set up and they make the Waffle House work. And
That's
I'm not
awesome.
like, people need to look into this. I don't know why we got into Waffle House, but like, I love Waffle House, and there's nothing more America than Waffle House because they make it happen.
It's because you said Jasmine Crockett, and I said she's trying to turn.
Yes,
I will
and
never
I'm
say- I will
defending. You
never
can see
say
I'm a
that reference
defender.
again.
I
I'll
will
never-
defend Waffle House.
You have changed my mind, you DeSantis simp,
Read the freaking tweet.
you scumbag, you piece of shit,
It's so
awful piece of shit that
Just read it.
hates Trump. Okay, so I'm going to go through this point by point because there's a guy clandestine who does not fuck, and he doesn't like you
Mm-mm.
because you're an asshole. So here we go.
Allegedly.
And it doesn't matter what I say here, nor what you clear up. I'm going to say this before we get into this. It doesn't matter anything here. People are still going to hate you and probably loop me into it. Here we go.
Good.
Kyle is a DeSantis bro who said Trump was part of the swamp because Trump wanted a new building for the FBI. I don't think the FBI deserved a new building, and when he said that, I did not agree with him on that.
Yeah, that was the entirety of my point. You'll actually be able to read it because he quoted it.
Oh, is it on there?
It's in the evidence on your left
Oh,
part
FBI
of the screen.
headquarters should be. Oh, I'm sorry, it's part of your file. I didn't realize it was part of your. Oh, how about it's the largest thing on my screen?
Yeah, it's the biggest part of your screen.
I'm a good reader. The FBI headquarters should not be moved to a faraway location. Should stay right where it is. In a new and spectacular building, and the best location for now. Yeah,
Such a bad take.
I mean, look, I agree with most of what Trump says, but I disagree with that one. That's
It was a bad take. And look, the fun thing about Trump is when he's wrong and everybody pushes back, then he fixes himself. Like he was wrong about
he does.
He was wrong in Florida about the abortion amendment that they were trying to do. And so he said it wrong and everybody came out and like lost their minds, and then he fixed it because he's a populist. So like the fact of the matter is the FBI already has a headquarters, and it's lame. And they have a second headquarters already. Headquarters 2.0 is in Huntsville, Alabama. So maybe talk to people that know a lot about the FBI, or people like me who have made it their life's mission to try to dismantle and destroy the things that are evil within it. And one of the things is that headquarters is awful. And you wanted to get it as far away from DC as possible. And sending it to Huntsville, you will actually self-select the type of people that will go to headquarters, and you will get people that want to hang out in DC. They will quit. They will not go there. Like you will actually dismantle some of the culture because you'll surround it by the red area that is Huntsville. Like being in Alabama is a no-go zone. There's so much redneck and MAGA fear within the senior executive service of the FBI that they will self-select to not go there anymore.
Yep.
And it's so simple. Like all you do is you could literally just make, and I've recommended this to Kash, just send these people to go down there and be in Huntsville. And a bunch of them won't take that move. Yep. They'll just SIE. They'll self-initiate elimination.
I agree with you on that one 100% actually.
Because I'm right, but
no, it's because I'm a deep state sellout, obviously.
Clearly,
even though I spent just in case people are wondering, I spent an hour and a half today doing a live that 100,000 plus people tuned into, celebrating Kash Patel today. But anyway, whatever. And you're on his list for supporting him. I mean, you lost all sorts of all of your credentials and everything for publicly supporting Kash Patel. But whatever, you're still a sellout.
No big deal.
Yeah, fuck you. Kyle said Kyle said the FBI needed to be fully deleted, not reformed, and that anyone who argued with him was a Trump stooge and did not know what they were talking about. He did not want a new director of the FBI. He wanted it deleted on sight despite the fact that FBI carry out one of the core functions of the government. He insisted that Trump was wrong and he was right.
That's all true, by the way. All of that is true. One, I did say that. Two, I'm correct. But because there is no political will to get rid of the FBI, the best second position is have someone comes in that says, I'm going to dismantle this thing down to the studs, which is what Kash has said in multiple public places. And he's been called to the carpet for it because people are like, oh my God, do you really mean you want to make it into a museum for the deep state? And everyone's like, yay. All the MAGA people are, yay. Because it's a great idea that you should destroy things that are bad.
Yes.
You should stop doing things that are evil. And the FBI has basically, it has left the field when it comes to being honorable and doing the thing that people think it does. Like the FBI doesn't even do what people think the FBI does. It's an intelligence agency and they say it themselves. And anybody who calls it a law enforcement agency doesn't know what the FBI does today, which has kind of been my mission because my first job out of Quantico was sent to go look at Americans who were talking to Chinese people. That's the end of it. There's literally no allegation of criminality. There's no allegations of security risks. My first cases were Americans that were in touch with ethnically Chinese people, either on the continent or in the United States. And there was nothing else. And I was like, why are we investigating these people? And they're like, so we can know more stuff.
Was that Chinese person Lindy Lee?
No, it wasn't, but it could have been. I mean, she'd be a great example of somebody that you could look into for sure. Yeah. And this is the craziest thing. And she's an American citizen now, so she should have all the rights that everybody else does. If you're an American, you shouldn't be investigated for no reason. I'm telling you, people would straight up have investigations. This is an exact example. I'm going to talk around it a little bit vaguely so we don't reveal who it is. But we had an investigation into someone who had worked for the federal government, no longer worked there, and had also gone to grad school with somebody who was a legit Chinese spy and got PNG'd.
Wow.
Like years ago. And we were still investigating the guy. And I went and talked to him and it's like, hey man, I'm here because you didn't list some contacts on your SF-86, your federal background check. And that's like a ruse version to talk to him. And he's like, oh yeah, that's just because I was lazy. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. I read your SF-86. You were lazy as hell. Like it was the laziest shit you've ever seen. Tim, at one point it was like, when you lived in Denver, who's someone that knew you there? And he was like, Marcy Gray or whatever. And then they were like, and who's Marcy Gray to you? And he's like, girlfriend. He's like, where's Marcy Gray live? Denver. Like just didn't give a shit. Like he just did not care at all. And so you just go, okay, well, that guy was phoning it in because he knew he was getting the job.
Yeah.
Right. He was already hired. And so the SF-86 was just sort of superfluous and it was just like a rubber stamp. And so when I asked him about the guy, he was like, oh yeah. He's like, I think I talked to him on Facebook like a couple years ago. He's like, didn't he get kicked out of the country for being a spy? And I'm like, yeah, he did. And he was like, yeah. I was like, has he ever reached out to you? And he's like, no, I don't know why he would. But if he did, I would probably call somebody. And I was like, cool, you can call me. Here's my card. I'm closing the case. Like, bloop, the end.
Yeah.
8 years that case was open. 8 flipping years of pulling down all of his financials and looking into his contacts and scouring his social media that people were doing. I got in and I basically spent the first year in the FBI trying to close all the cases they gave me because they all look like bullshit. And that's crazy.
Yeah.
So if you don't know that that's what the FBI is doing, you shouldn't be talking about whether the FBI should have a headquarters, and you sure as hell shouldn't be talking about like what your opinions are about an agency that you know nothing about, which is basically everybody that's not been there. Even the people
you sound like a deep state shill.
I know. Even the people that have worked in the FBI, if they didn't work there, like maybe post 2010, 12, like if they didn't see the second Barack Obama term, and maybe even more accurately, like 2016, when it really got the juice, there was a Barack Obama executive order that happened at the end of his term in 2016, before the election, and I think they were assuming that Hillary was going to win. And what they did is they gave complete unfettered access to raw FISA information directly to the FBI. It used to be that if the FBI wanted some of that stuff, they could request it from the NSA, and there was some kind of a handoff and then redactions and what they call minimization. So they would, cross out names and give you person one or US person one or foreign person one. So they would give you this kind of redacted version. The FBI got raw FISA starting like right when I started working there. And so the stuff we were getting was coming like, it was like looking into somebody else's email box. It was looking into their Skype messages. It was freaking wild. And I didn't know that wasn't always the case. And that happened in 2016 and then moving into 2017. So if you didn't work in the Bureau post 2016, post 2017, you don't even know what the FBI was because it morphed into this animal that allowed the Peter Strzok's and the Andy McCabe's and the Lisa Page and this political animal that metastasized. It also gave them the power of raw FISA, which it never had before unless they actually went to the FISA court. And the only way that you could get a bad FISA then is by lying. But once you had raw access to the data, you could straight up just Google somebody's name in the database. It was called the Data Warehouse System, DWS. And you would literally go in there, type in a name. I'd put Tim's handle in, and it pops up, and I could find out your comms there. If you had some comms with anybody that we were looking into, or that the NSA was looking into.
Do that. Do you think Kash would let me do that at some point?
Yeah, I think so. It's fine.
I think that'll be really fun.
Yeah. No, I think
I was reached out to, actually. This is a fun. You're making me serious here. I was going to have a fun time, but now
we're having fun. We're just
well, that's serious. Anyway, I got reached out to. They called me 3 years ago about January 6th because I recorded 8 minutes outside. I walked up. I know not to even touch the steps on the Supreme Court side of the Capitol, right? Because I know you go up about 5 steps, and then there's usually a no trespassing sign there that wasn't there. And so I know not to touch those steps, and all the cops were chill when I was there. And I turned around, I came up on that side, recorded my entire experience. Thank God I did that. And then went away. I got a phone call from an agent here that I think did they have to call every single person at January 6th that they could identify?
Oh boy. Did they have to? That's a great question. It's kind of loaded. So here's the deal. Like, you have discretion. I got a bunch of I got asked to evaluate January 6 leads. That's what they called them. And we had like north of 500,000 if you listen to what Matt Taibbi said. And I think he's right, because the FBI was sharing this information with the various social medias. And this is Twitter file stuff. So 500,000 sounds about right. We had 20 to 40,000 in the queue, and people were working on them nonstop all day long. I got yelled at, or I got called out by Ryan Riley, who I actually talk to now fairly frequently because he's okay. Like, we're slowly red pilling him. He's gone back to church, so I'm winning. But Ryan, he called me out. He's like, Seraphin claims that he deleted like a bunch of these leads. Like, I straight up did delete a bunch of them, because when they gave them to me, I read it, and there was no allegation of criminal activity. And that's the standard for an evaluation. If there's no allegation or information that a federal crime took place, and saying like, Tim really liked Reagan, and he had a poster of Reagan, and he probably was there, and he's an asshole, and so you should investigate him. That's like some kind of personality problem, no allegation of criminal activity. And I would just say, sounds like the person may have engaged in something that was First Amendment protected. There's no further information that indicates the FBI should do this touch. Boom. And I'd throw it out. And I did that a couple hundred times. But so you do have discretion. Like, what most people did is they just went out and interviewed Tim. That was the normal move. So it's the person who called you did have a choice, and they decided to go. Now, the fact that you were physically there and you had a live stream might be a little bit more of an indicator, but honestly, First Amendment protected, no allegation or information that there's a federal crime. I'm not calling you. I've got other things to do. I've got way better things to do. I've got, I've got an Indian who hung himself that I'm going to get called out to tonight at 11 o'clock in my old job that I had to go drive out to. I'm not going to call some guy randomly because he had a live stream at January 6th. Like, who gives a shit?
Well, that was so the guy wanted to do lunch, and I'm like, just
do lunch, yeah.
He was like, you want to do lunch? I'm like, no, you can ask me all the questions you need to ask me right now. And he was like, did you see any criminal activity? I'm like, you literally saw what I saw. Like, you had the video.
Right.
Saw a guy trying to. You can see there's a guy trying to slash tires in the video. He goes, we got him. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, thank you for your service.
Cops get beat up. I was like, nope. I was like, if I would have put my phone down and probably helped the cop. Like, that's just how it works. Like, that's the
right. That's who that crowd generally was, outside of some people. And like I said, not all J6ers were the same. I have beef with some people because I think that they did things like, beat up cops, and I think that's a problem. But at this point, the FBI and the DOJ specifically, they went so far down the rabbit hole. If they had just stuck to people who had gotten violent and broken federal property, even though it wasn't really fair, because that same stuff happened all through the summer of 2020. And I was working for the Bureau in Washington, D.C. So I saw this with my own eyes. I saw us walking around wearing body armor at night and like hiding from the Antifa people. We were staying in a space where we weren't going to run into them. Secret Service had to deal with them on the North Lawn all the time. And I saw how they were handled with kid gloves. And it was bullshit. I mean, it really was. Like, anybody who worked there was like, what are we doing? But if you had just stuck to January 6th people who had fought with cops, gotten physical with cops, and had broken property, stolen things, and or broke windows or kicked down doors or whatever, any of those things, if that's all you stayed with, which would have been maybe like 200 or 300 people, nobody would have been upset. They would have been like, yeah, fair play. You were acting like an asshole. Like, now, the fact that they tried him in D.C. in the district court, most people don't understand the nuance here, but let me just break it down. D.C. has 2 courts because it's a federal district. It has the Superior Court, which is like state court, and it has the district court, which is federal court. And the same AUSAs, the Assistant United States Attorneys, your line prosecutors for DOJ, they do the prosecutions in both of those. And so they can charge it in Superior or in district court. And they chose to take simple trespassing and charge them in federal district court, which is crazy because there are actually supposed to be real crimes that you go charge there. And if you took them to superior court, where you're like, hey, this is a trespassing charge, the judge would have kicked you out with like 30 days of community service and not waste my time, because there's like 5 guys on the docket after you who stabbed somebody last night, who strangled their girlfriend, who drove a vehicle drunk and plowed into a family. Like, there's all kinds of violence that happens in DC. So they don't have time for you. We've had gun charges for felons that were felons, felony every couple of years for 40 years. And you go in their house because they're making PCP, which they still do, and they've got guns that they admit to being theirs. And I've had those gun charges kicked in Superior Court because they don't have time for that shit. Like, they got real crime, like real violent crime. DC sucks.
Well, the other side of it too is when you lock away somebody for a trespassing charge, like they time out on the amount of time that they could possibly serve on that charge anyway. Like, if you can't hold someone, I mean, that was the most ridiculous part of this whole program too for me. Not only was it that they're locking these people up because, leftists show up, and I've seen many times where celebrities show up, they refuse to move. They get charged with, interfering with congressional whatever, or trespassing or whatever. And they literally go to them. I remember there was one with like Amy Schumer. They're like, listen, Amy, do you really want to go to jail today? I mean, what are we going to do here?
Do you remember when they did it with AOC and she held her hands behind, but she wasn't actually handcuffed?
Yes.
She pantomimed being arrested. Like, this is, it's theater. They don't actually do. And the other thing is that anybody who's like, when I see these congressional, Congress members or whatever that are out there like getting really excited about members of Capitol Police, like Capitol Police is a glorified security guard company.
Yeah.
They shouldn't actually have any investigative capabilities, and I'm not even sure why they can arrest, because at the end of the day, they're not part of the executive branch. So what part of Congress allows them to arrest people? It's an executive function. I mean, that's a constitutional crisis if you want to get real. And I never knew anybody that they're not bad people. They're just the lowest level of anything when it comes to like federal LE that carries a gun. They're like, park police is a million times more elite than them. And they are. I mean, the park police guys are badasses. Like, I loved park police. They had medics that were medic helicopter pilots, and they flew around DC for Eagle One, which is the park police helicopter. And they're the only ones that can fly during the major events, the NSSEs that are like State of the Union, inauguration, whatever. And those dudes are studs. Like, they will land anywhere, and they will pick up a Leo in a bad spot, law enforcement officer. They'll pick them up if anything bad happens. Like, they are the primary law enforcement medevac, and they're stud paramedics. They're flight medics that also carry guns. Like, what's cooler than that? Those guys are super cool. And then like, you look at, like I said, but nobody thinks they are. Then you deal with like Capitol Police, and you're just like, basically, like, the most dangerous thing they do every day is tell someone where the bathroom is. They might get diarrhea on them. Let's be real. Let's be real here. I'm just keeping it real.
Back to me, because this is only about me. Mm-hmm. Why the hell would the agent who called me want to go to lunch?
Maybe they wanted to recruit you as a source. And so that's probably the most likely thing.
I seem like a sellout. I seem like somebody who would turn people in. Because, I mean, if I knew somebody who committed a crime, I would, but I don't. I don't hang out with those types.
Right. I mean, look, and maybe they wanted to get lunch, and like they can write it off if they're meeting with you. That's the other thing. They can write off the lunch with you, buy you lunch, and then attribute it to a source meet, and so that they can get reimbursed for going to a lunch they want to go. I knew a guy that went to lunch every single day, and he met with his sources every day. And you know what kind of a shitbag he was? Listen, Chris Kelly is a shitbag, and that's just his name. So, and he worked in DC, and so Chris, who's still an FBI agent, would go every single day to lunch, and he would have a meeting with a source, and he would order an appetizer and eat with the source, and then he would dismiss the source and then order a full lunch for him and whoever was with him.
Strong.
And then he would reimburse all of that. So he was spending hundreds of dollars a week to not eat lunch, to eat on the government's dime. And it wasn't even related to the person. He just wanted to go to like various restaurants. Absolute shitbag, and one of the laziest people you've ever met. But like, knew the system, and like, that's a pretty classic FBI agent move.
I used to have to respond. One of my very first jobs as a graduate intern was Social Security, and I used to have to respond to audits on behalf of my division of Social Security. I forget what it was, policy or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I remember one time they spent $400 on Panera Bread brownies. I'm like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And I made up some bullshit or whatever for them because I lied for the federal government 25 years ago. But I just was like, we needed carbohydrates for that event. But I'm pretty certain somebody just bought themselves gift cards. And then
most likely that's the case. Or there was a big tip to somebody that they were trying to impress, whatever. Some sort of scandal happened there that was minor. And yeah.
All right. I was interrogating you. I'm sorry.
Continue.
Sir, this is what you.
I'm really good at this. I mean,
you were trained to avoid this with other conversation that is incredibly interesting. How dare you? Kyle, then you went on to smear the guy, which again, like, look, I don't care if you
He's personally was offended because he said Sean Hannity's talking points, which is a bullshit talking point, which is that 90% of the FBI, the good men and women of the FBI. Listen, the good men and the women of the FBI were the ones who went out there and ran down J6 cases. Period. Like, that's a thing. Number one. And the second piece of it is that who do you think were the ones that were saying yes and got rid of all their colleagues? You know, who were the ones that were going out and calling out their friends for not having the COVID shots? It was the good men and women of the FBI. So are there good people there? Absolutely. Of course there are. But is it 90%? No way. Not even close. It might be 50-50, but I bet it's closer to 20 or 30%. There's a lot of people there that are very morally flexible and they mostly care about themselves. So when you put out a Sean Hannity talking point, which is what he was really offended by, I'm like, look, you're doing bullshit Fox News talking points. 90% of the FBI is great. Based on your what? Based on what experience do you have with the Bureau? So this guy got like offended by me calling out things that were factually true, you know, based on years of experience. And I was in 20 different field offices doing my job. I TDY'd to 20 different field offices while I worked there. So I saw like more than a third of the FBI.
Huh.
Just saying.
All right. How about we go to, let's see.
What other points we got?
We're running out of them. Kyle thinks he knows better than Trump, but is now celebrating Kash taking over the FBI and all of Trump's accomplishments.
Yeah.
After he said Trump was deep state. You never said Trump was deep state. You know that?
No, I've never said anything negative about Trump. I say I disagree with him when I disagree with him. Like I said, I don't know Donald Trump. I've never met him. He seems like a person that people like in real life, which I've always seen, and I've always found that fascinating.
Very nice guy. Yeah.
People are super loyal to what he does, and they get very excited about him as a human being. That takes a certain type of charisma, so I recognize what that is. But I don't have any particular loyalty to him. I listen to the ideas that are good. I think he's a master troll. I think he's funny as hell because he obviously knows how to get people's goat. And the more I watch it, do I think that he's doing 4D chess all the time? No, I think that he lucks out, and I think he just goes with his gut. And sometimes it's right, but does he know what the next move is going to be? No. And does he make mistakes? Obviously. How about Chris Wray?
But I think he would admit that stuff, though. I mean,
I think he would too. I don't think he's that cocky about it. I think he wouldn't say it to like an enemy, but I think he would laugh about it. He seems self-deprecating in some ways, in kind of like a cocky way. Trump is not that like confusing of an animal to see. But are you going to find me like kiss his ass about everything? No. And I either he would like that or he wouldn't like that. But we've never met, so I don't know. And
also, I
don't take credit for anything he's done.
He's the kind of guy who, and I was talking about this last night. He brings people around that are smarter than him and who are subject experts more so than him. Obviously, he doesn't know the inner workings of the FBI down to a T. And it was kept away from him for a very long time.
And neither does Kash Patel for whatever it's worth. So here's the best thing, right? So I made some suggestions to Kash in person, and on the phone, and I was like, here's what I would do. And he said, okay. He said, what would people do to punch holes in your idea? Which is a very astute question and not something that I've heard a lot of people ask. They usually go like, oh, okay, thanks. That's your opinion. He said, have you steel-manned this? Have you tried to pressure test your idea? He said, how would people argue against what you said? And so I told him, I was like, this is what they would say. This is their claims. And he said, how would you defend against that? And I said this. And he's like, oh, okay, good. And then he just made his own decision on whatever he was going to do with that information. That's a very clever thing to do. If you don't have all the information, you go to a trusted or mostly trusted source, ask them how competent they're, how they evaluate their own information, and then go make your own decision later and never tell them what you're going to do with it. Because I'd never asked him. I never was like, hey, did you take my idea? Like, I don't care. Like, I just gave you information. Do what you want. Yeah. That's what smart people do.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, they just go, thank you for that information. I'm going to ask some other people I trust as well. And I'm going to kind of wait it out. And then I'm going to decide, like, which one feels right, which one is actually feasible. Because that's another question. Like, do we have the political capital? Do we have the manpower? Do we have the assets to enact it? Just get all the information.
Well, my whole thing with Trump too, like, so my favorite appointment of him so far from him is RFK Jr.
Okay.
Because if you want to make something efficient, like HHS, you put a guy in there who's a skeptic of everything. And he's either going to be proven right or proven wrong.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Very dramatic either way.
I like Sean Duffy. Is that weird?
No, he's one of the best. Like, he left.
So bright. He's so nice.
Yes.
He's a father that has a ton of kids. He's got 9 kids. So I've been, full disclosure, I've been on his podcast a couple times. I sent him a congratulations text when that came out. And
No bragging.
I just think he's he's just a nice man. He's like, they're just good people. Rachel is as well. They're lovely people. And we have this like BS spat like that started because Dan Bongino started siding with people that I didn't agree with. And it's like, but like, I'm happy for their whole family because they're really nice people. And like, I just want to see good things happen. And I'm stoked that we have some decent human beings instead of like a Pete Buttigieg. So I don't take credit for anybody's anything, but like, I'm really happy that there are really nice people. He also chose Brian Birch, who's a friend of mine that worked at Catholic Vote. He ran the organization Catholic Vote, which turned out in big numbers to actually deliver they were the highest swing. Catholics tend to go Democrat for some reason. It makes no sense to me at all. But as a lifelong Catholic, I was working with Brian and the folks at Catholic Vote for 2 years, and he named him the ambassador to the Holy See, which is badass. Like, what a cool thing to do. So there's some really good picks in there, and then there's some ones that I'm like, ooh, I wonder how that's gonna. Like, I'm kind of like watching Tulsi Gabbard and wondering, But look, a big tent is a big tent. There are going to be people that like you and I don't agree with when it comes to policy. Hands down. Like, I don't even know if we agree on policy on everything, but I know that we're not going to agree with everybody because that's what happens when you bring in people. That's what coalition governments used to do in a lot of places.
Crazy concept.
How many times you've ever seen, like, what a moment. Somebody said this the other day, and I'm like, it's kind of a cautionary moment too, but have you ever seen somebody run on the Democrat ticket to become the president as a Democrat and then be named into the next cabinet as a Republican? No. I've never seen that. And I don't know if there's a lot of history for that, but it's a really neat move. And again, like you say, as long as you're putting skeptics in and people who have been victims of the thing that they're going after, they're going to have an awful lot of questions. So I'm open to it. And I do think it's a life-changing experience the minute that a government targets you when you used to think that you were safe and that you were loyal to like maybe like institutions in general. I'm certainly an example of that. Like, I'm an institution guy right up until I wasn't.
Yeah.
But you know, being a skeptic, I agree with you. RFK, awesome. Like, a lot of his picks are really good because they're disruptive.
Yep, that's the whole point. That's all I want.
I want to see chaos because in chaos we get like certain things expose themselves. A lot of evil will present itself because it'll be out of its norm and the status quo is disrupted, so we can remove that. And then you'll also see some people. I had Stuart Rhodes on my podcast the other day, and he asked me a question. He said, "Do you think that an experience makes the man or does it reveal the man?" And it's a good question. And I think depending on the man, it could do either one. Some experiences actually do forge people, and some experiences reveal people. And it just depends on that person's character from underneath. Like,
Well, I was gonna say, let's take a look at Duffy, right? So he's sworn in. How many hours later was that plane tragedy that he like showed up in person to?
Yeah, like minutes.
I mean, he didn't even have time to like, get in the. I don't even know if he touched the office.
No, he was probably still in the same suit that he got sworn in.
Yeah, and showed up. I mean, that's something that I would not imagine that good old Mayor Pete would have showed up to.
No, he'd be busy with his chest feeding rig on, like trying to feed a toddler because he doesn't know anything about babies, and
it just speaks to that. Like, look. The other side of this too is like the skeptics and things. I mean, not the other side, but the other good thing about these skeptics is that they're willing to work to either be, like I said, like be proven right or be proven wrong. These people have something to prove. And
you don't have any skin in the game if you're a skeptic. That's the best thing. Like, I list that on my profile. It's actually part of my bio. If people look over on X, like that, it is in my bio on purpose because it's what I always tell my audience you should do. That's what a good investigator does. Whatever it is that you think that you want to believe, set out to disprove it. If you ever want to like really get honed in on something, try to disprove what you think is real. And it'll set you into a good place. This is why these guys that's why anonymous accounts like just make me laugh. If like, look, there's a purpose for anonymous accounts. I'm not mad at them for having it. I don't give a shit at the end of the day. But if you're going to go out there and attack people whose real name and face is out there, like, who the fuck are you? Like, honestly, like, who are you? Go Google my name and I'm in the congressional record because Congress people came after me. No one's ever heard of you in real life. Like, you don't matter. And so and that's not like a flex. That's just like, it's such a lame thing to do that you're going to go after people who've put their name and their face to something and actually held an opinion. And then you walk around in the world and you can just smugly be this. And maybe your friends know that you have some like Twitter account. Like, dude, I had the FBI subpoena my records and they were investigating me. I had people call and tell me from the Hoover building, I just sat in a meeting for 45 minutes with people from DOJ talking about how for the next 3 years, they're going to try to jam you up and put you in jail. Like, that shit doesn't happen because you have some bullshit anonymous Twitter account. It happens when you're actually like causing problems for people who don't like what you have to say and you're being really disruptive. You're disrupting the status quo. So, and that happened to me and it was not a good feeling, by the way. I haven't slept well in 2 years.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you can now a little bit better with Kash in, but
Yeah, I still feel like I'm like it's not normal. Like once you change your own status quo to the point where, you know, my daughter who's 7 right now, one of the little girls that drove across the country with me, when she was 5, we moved into this house. And this is a rental house. I'm sitting in a rental house. It's not like some fancy studio. This is an extra bedroom in a house that I'm renting that I don't own because I can't own a house anymore because we sold the house that we had. Now I can't afford the old house that I used to have in New Mexico. And and she sat down at dinner and she was praying over her meal. And she's like, bless us, Lord, bless this food, bless our family, keep us safe from our enemies. A 5-year-old said that. And so my wife and I are looking at each other with kind of big eyes. We're like, whoa, what do we do in here? Like, what do we do? So after it's over, it's like, oh, that's beautiful, honey. Who are our enemies? And my 5-year-old daughter, who is precocious and probably pretty brilliant, she's got a good gene pool to back on. She was like, the government and the FBI. And I'm like, well, shit, you're not wrong. She's not wrong, is she? But like a 5-year-old said that because she's picking up on the vibe of what her parents are dealing with.
Yeah.
And my wife and I are waking up before 6 a.m. every day because the FBI hits the door at 6. And so unless they have an out of hours warrant service, it's going to be between 6 and 10 p.m. So 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. But they always go at 6. They go as early as possible. Everybody wakes up early. And I've been on those search warrants. Like I've been on a lot of them. I've been on more than 100. So I know what it looks like. And I don't want my door kicked down while I'm still asleep. That's a bad feeling.
Yeah.
That's a fucked up way to live for 2 years. Like it doesn't really go away right away.
No, I'd imagine it doesn't. That's well. Doris, by the way, made a good point though about your daughter. I mean, it's just sad that she has to be exposed to that. I mean, it's like
kids have gone through hard things for all. Like I always watch. You remember watching Little House on the Prairie?
Yeah.
You ever go back and watch the pilot again as a grown up?
No.
I encourage you to do that. Because if you ever think that you got problems, go watch the opening, like 90-minute or whatever it is, 120-minute pilot of Little House on the Prairie, and you will immediately not feel sorry for anything that you have going on. Like they left everything they knew, they put it all in a wagon, they went out into the middle of the plains in Kansas or whatever the hell it was. He built a house, he built the foundation, he carved it all out with the sweat of his brow and all this kind of thing. He fought off freaking Indians and wolves and other wild shit, and he like hacked all this stuff by hand. And then the government showed up and said, you have to leave and get the fuck off this property. We're giving it back to the Indians. And then they had to leave and they were devastated. And you're just like, dude.
That was the opening. That's the pilot of Little House on the Prairie.
It's the entire book of Little House on the Prairie. So the series Little House on the Prairie has almost nothing to do with the book. The entire book is in the pilot. And then you have like Little House. So Little House in the Big Woods is the prequel, and then you had like On the Banks of Plum Creek and so on. It's part of my daughter's curriculum, so I know that the title still. But all of the subsequent stories are written after the fact. Oh, by the way, they're also all shot in California. When you're watching, you're like, that's the ranches. Those are in Southern California. That's not what it looks like in Minnesota. Like, that's not a Minnesota tree.
Yeah.
But when you watch it, that's what happened. Like the entire first book is all there. And at the end of it, I kid you not, they braved Indians. They had a plains fire, a wildfire that swept across, and they kept their house from burning, and they've done everything they can to just stay alive and carve out an existence on this scrap of land after building a house and roof and spending every penny they had on a plow and all that shit. And the government shows up with a couple of with infantry troops, like cavalry guys. And they're like, you have to leave because we made a deal with the Indians and like, you're out. And they're devastated and they fucking leave everything they just spent like a year and a half or 2 years building with everything they had. And they leave it and they get back in a wagon and they go find a new place to live. So if you think your life is rough, it'd be equivalent of like putting everything you had into your dream house and then someone burning it to the ground. And then you have to go start over with whatever you can carry on your back. And so, like your life's not that hard. And mine isn't that hard either. And my kids are going to be fine because of that. That's why I'm not sad for them.
Well, you train them to be fighting machines. I've seen the movie where you train the little girl in the woods and you teach her how to hunt. And then she becomes
like Hannah.
Yeah. And then she becomes like a murder machine. Like it's
No. My girl started shooting at the ages of 3 and 5. And they probably have more rounds downrange than like a lot of grown men. And certainly like some FBI agents. Like we have suppressed drum-fed 22 rifles that they can sit and put on tripods and just rip.
But do they know how to get a free lunch out of their job? And that's really what you need to teach.
That's what it's really all about. Yeah, you're right.
You need help with that. I'm good at that one. I'm good at getting free shit out of people. All right, that's that. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm
dumb.
Here. I'm going to take it back here. I'm going to end with you thinking you're better. You're an arrogant. You just said it sounds like that actually from this conversation I've been having with you. You sound like an arrogant coward who won't admit you're wrong. It's really I can tell from this conversation where you're a family man who cares about the country. You really sound like a fucking arrogant coward.
It's funny. I have people come up sometimes because I'll go places and people are nice in public and like, look, that's an exception. Anonymous internet account is an exception to my normal experience with people. People are stupidly kind. My realtor. Okay, so we just rented a new house. We're gonna have to move in a little bit, and my realtor is asking me some questions like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "I run a podcast." And he's like, "Really?" He's like, "How long have you been doing that?" And I was like, "Oh, since I got kicked out of the FBI." And he's like, "Why did you get kicked out of the FBI? Like, do I want to rent to this guy, right?" And I'm like, well, I went to Congress with some whistleblower activity. I showed that they were investigating parents at school boards, and I alleged that the attorney general had lied. And then I exposed that they were investigating Catholics in Richmond, Virginia. And I've got about 17 or 18 different whistleblower disclosures to include FISA and some stuff that hasn't been public because it's just not interesting to the mass media. And he's like, I want to shake your hand. like people are really nice to me. And he goes, thank you for what you did. And I was like, dude, that's a nice thing to say. But let me be the real arrogant asshole here about this because that's the best way I know how to be. It had nothing to do with anybody except my own kids and my wife. Because my wife and I had this real simple conversation. It was really easy. And it's like, hey, honey, I think that what's going on is wrong. Now, by the way, I was a COVID vax refuser. So I refused to get it. And then they said, well, that's fine. We're not. And I said, I have a religious accommodation I'd like you to process. And they were like, well, we don't want to do that because then we'd have to say yes. And then I go, okay. If you're not going to process it, what happens next? And they said, you just have to bend the knee and do a COVID swab and test for COVID every 72 hours and upload a negative COVID test. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that every 72 hours. I have a top secret clearance. I've been a paramedic for over a decade. I've literally done thousands of clinical nasal swabs. And I'm not going to do that because that's like, why don't you just get all the Christians who believe a certain thing to go do a specific thing that marks on their timesheet Christians who don't believe in the vax. And then you guys go and eventually that turns into the Holocaust. Like that's what I look down because they literally train you when you go to the FBI Academy that the Holocaust happened for a very specific reason. That minor government officials said okay when they should have asked why or said no. And so it only happens with law enforcement buy-in and government official buy-in. You don't get the identification of a future victimized minority without the government buying into it. And I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to discriminate against me. That's what I actually said. And by the way, that's the basis for my lawsuit, which is looking pretty good right now. Because I said, I'm not going to take that. And so they were like, well, you can't come in the office. And I was like, fine, I won't. And then I told my wife, hey, I'm going to lose my job over this. And she was like, good. You'll get another job. And I said, okay. And I'm like, we're going to have to sell our house. Like, we don't have an income. And she's like, good, that's fine. We'll figure this out. And so once you start having the conversation with your spouse, and the questions that we really had was so simple. The question was, are we going to be able to look our kids in the eye in 15 years when the country has gone to shit and nobody said no? Can we look at them and say, hey, at least your dad kept his job and he did what he was told and he kept a roof over our heads? Or are we going to say, we put our foot down and we don't know what was going to happen next, but the answer was no, this is unacceptable. This is not how Americans operate. We're not subjects. And the consequences are the consequences. And we had to sell our house. So we don't have a cool house in New Mexico anymore. And I had a really cool house, Tim. It was way cooler than most people's houses. I could see them. The mountains were in my backyard. They were 300 yards away from my little wall. I lived on like an acre and a half. And I had 500,000 acres of public land that I could basically shoot a slingshot to. It was so close. And it was just empty, epic desert everywhere and mountains that change color every single, hour of the day. They were a different color. It was badass. I mean, it really was. We could drive up the hill and go into the almost like a rainforest area in the mountains in New Mexico. We had these waterfalls and stuff that were 5 minutes away from the house, dripping springs and a walking trail. And then people had horses out by me. It was really a cool place. And I would do it 10 times out of 10, but not for anybody, not for you and not for anybody that's listening. I did it for my kids because I got to look them in the eye at one point and just go, you're going to have a hard decision one day in your life and you better do the right thing. And I'm going to live it. And it sucked. I had a pregnant wife with no home. I had 3 children and we were homeless. Legitimately, we had no home. We had to go live with my parents and stay in their extra 2 bedrooms. And my wife was pregnant. We went to CPAC, not CPAC. We went to America Fest. And everyone's like, this is so cool. You're out here speaking. I spoke to 10,000 people. My wife stood on stage and she was pregnant with our 4th child right now. And we had no home and no job and no income. And it's like, whatever. That's what you got to do sometimes. Sometimes you got to step up. So anyway, but I'm an arrarrogant coward asshole. And I agree to all that.
You sounded that that made you sound even more arrogant.
I know. I want to take all that. Put that on me. I'll carry it.
Piece of shit.
That's right.
I got nothing. Like I want to tell personal stories too, but they're not anywhere near on par as that. I mean, like
Come on.
my big one was I was the ambassador to the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. It's a 92% outdoor festival, and I did all the barrel picks and stuff. And 2 weeks beforehand, they required either the COVID test or a vax to get into it. And I had their most popular post of the entire probably ever for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, because I was like, go fuck yourselves. I'm not doing that. I've stood up against this vax and requiring it for a long time, and I won't do it. So I cost myself, 2 cases of whiskey and a thing. And then
that's a serious cost.
it's nowhere near yours.
But nobody can say otherwise. You still would have liked it.
I would have. But my favorite part of the whole thing was that rather than other conservatives stand up for me, the festival went, and they never apologized to me. They went to the host on radio that I used to fill in for and started working with him rather than come and apologize to me. And that guy knew that I had stood up to them because of it's David Webb, knew that I stood up to the Kentucky Bourbon Festival because of their requirements and their just unconstitutionality and what they were doing. And he doesn't care. He'll take the free handout. And there are too many conservatives like that, by the way. And that's why I respect you, honestly, you coward piece of shit. Because
you know David Webb, the name David Webb is actually the true name of Jason Bourne from the Robert Ludlum books.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's his real name.
Is it 2 B's?
Yeah.
Yeah, start calling him Jason Bourne. That's what you ought to do.
Well, we don't talk. Everybody thought I was.
If you did, that's what you would call him, though.
Everyone thought for some reason, because I filled in for the guy 40 times a year. By the way, best job in all of radio. It takes off like 3 months a year. Everybody thought because I filled in for him like 40 times a year that we were friends. And I'm like, brother, we don't talk. Like I'm the producer's pick to come in there. I'm the one that they like when they want to take a vacation and have a nice guy come in and do some good interviews and just have an easy show. They bring me in. Has nothing to do with the.
There's nothing wrong with being the producer's picked. You'll go a long ways in that. Something like if that's the person who's making the call, then that's who you want to be friends with anyway.
The gay mafia in the Northeast and the producers there, they're all conservative gays that run most of the shows.
Yeah. Also, all the congressional aides apparently are gay, which is very weird. And they're also a gay mafia in Congress, which most people don't know.
There's also a gay mafia and people who claim to and have families and aren't on our side that speak at conferences about morals and values. But
there is nothing more gross than like knowing the backstory of some of these people and having interacted with them and then see how they actually handle like their real life, and they're just atrocious pieces of shit. And people are like, they're so great, they're so brave, and I'm like, man. I have no qualms with, like, I don't owe anybody anything. That's the upside to what's going on right now. Like, I don't work for a government. I work for me. Like, people, like somebody was like, you're going to get fired. I'm like, from who? Like, I'm the worst boss in the world. I drive myself like a slave. It's 8:00 at night and I'm still working. And I got here in this chair at like 5 a.m. So yeah, you can't fire me. I work for me.
Hold on. This guy brought up David Webb. He won't be invited back. Well, they didn't renew my contract. But also here's the thing.
I don't even know who David Webb is. So
nobody fucking does. He's a mid. How do I say this?
Just bluntly.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say. So for me, when it comes to exposing these people, I'm better on the back end, like them, haha. And
gross.
I'm not going to make a case on Twitter for against most of the people that I don't like, because it's not worth my time to have a bunch of people who don't know what's going on in the real world and what really happens and how disgusting these people are argue with me that because they saw them on the TV screen or they saw them at a conference that they believe every little thing that they say.
That's the idolatry that we talked about. It
Correct.
really is. I mean, it's
that's
they
a
have
full circle right there.
It is. I know that was a great tie back, but that's exactly what happens. So we have this massive idea that the person that exists in our mind is the real person. It's this two-dimensional cutout that we've seen what their posts are and we've read their stories and we've heard people that we like. Steve Bannon said nice things about them. Tucker Carlson invited them on their program. So they must be awesome. And the answer is like some of those people are definitely shitbags. And some of those people are really, really great. Hands down. Like, I'll just throw like a random example. There was a time when Mike Benz was being attacked. He goes by Mike Benz Cyber, right? So Mike Benz, who's been doing awesome and he's just stepped out there and he's been doing all this exposure. There was this big push about Framegate. I can't remember what the hell it was called, Framer Game or something. There was some handle that he had handled back in the day. And so people were like, I had people reach out to me. They're like, you've got to disown Mike Benz. And I was like, one, who the fuck are you? Like, no, seriously, like, who the fuck are you? Like, why are you making demands of me? We've never met. Mike Benz came to my home and he had breakfast with my children. Do you know how ballsy you'd have to be some kind of a shill fake to go to a former FBI agent's house and hang out with him and his family? That'd be a bold move for anybody, no matter how smart you think you are. And Mike Benz is brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, he's just straight up brilliant. But when people come out and make these asks of you, it's like they think something that they don't know. And I basically go like, if I don't know you, I don't know you. So I don't have a strong opinion. And if I do know you, then I might have a strong opinion if I have enough information to make that opinion. And some of these people, where you and I may have interacted with those people in real life, in a real format, we have all the information. And all of the other people that are out there that are sycophants, they're fans of someone that they've never met. And it's the weirdest thing in the world to stake. Like I've gotten a couple of death threats, which are very funny, for reasons that make no sense whatsoever, for people that, if these actual people, I look at their profile and I'm like, we would get along and you would hate the person you're defending. You've never met that person, but you would despise them because they are awful, atrocious, shitty people. Like, they just are. And you would never say that to me in my face. You would shake my hand and we would be friendly and we could have a beer together. So it's just it's such a weird world. And that's why I don't get offended by Twitter that much. Actually I had Sean Ryan reach out to me and we were talking. This is right after the bomber, the guy blew up in Las Vegas at Trump Tower.
Yeah.
And I accidentally got myself into the news because somebody who ended up on Sean Ryan's show, a guy named Sam Shoemate, he ended up reaching out through a mutual friend and said, hey, can you get some information to the FBI? Because I don't want them kicking down my door, which is a smart move. And so I said, yeah, let me find a reputable agent and get it into the right hands so you're not just firing it off into the void. So we did. And then Sean Ryan and I ended up having this conversation. And then people started calling him a shill and that he was hiding all the truth about this guy who clearly had like some mental issue and ended up kind of killing himself, which it's very important to talk about that problem, mental illness and breaks in reality for our veterans, because it's really hard for especially special operators. They have a really high instance of just cracking because so much is asked of them. And so I have a ton of sympathy for people in that space. But anyway, he sent me a message and he said, I don't remember what it was. He was like, hey man, or like, is the FBI going to come at me? And I'm like, no. And he was like, it feels really heavy right now. And I'm like, you're in the retard vortex, dude. You're in the retard vortex. That's what Twitter is. I said, the upside is you could put your phone in a Faraday cage and walk out of the water and it can't get you. So just walk away from it and go kiss your kids, which is what I regularly tell people to do. Some people need to, the whole, like, go touch grass. Like, some people really need to touch grass badly.
That's why I never understand when people are talking about cyberbullying. It's like, how to stop cyberbullying is you turn the phone off.
Straight up. This is a Faraday sleeve. I can throw it in there and I will get no more cyberbullying.
It's an incredible thing. I mean, it's just like, I don't understand. I've never been, again, I also don't read the comments a lot. So
I love the comments. Yeah.
It depends. Well, actually the other day my comments weren't working. And so cause I was watching, there was, some big gossip or whatever on the internet the other day. And I was enjoying the read. But it's also really fun for me because I know most of the journalists who are the good journalists who are still around. And so when I see people write stories and leave little things out, like a little nugget the other day, I don't know how much you were following things. I'm going to speak generically here because I'm a coward. If you took a look at
somebody did something and there was a productive experience in the thing.
There was a productive experience. And in one of the photos, there was a chessboard that was arranged incorrectly. And I reached out to my friend who was a journalist and I was like, did you do that? And they were like, what are you talking about? LOL. And I was like, oh, neat.
Yeah, you saw like an Easter egg in the thing.
Because I know the characters, I know the good journalists, and I know the good people. You know the good people too, because it's very easy to. And also, it's also at this point, like you obviously were trained for this, but like on top of, I've been around in politics now for almost 25 years. Like, you can spot these people from a mile away.
They're so easy. Yeah, look. We were talking about the Asian situation, and you're listening to that lady talk, and you just go like, oh. Like, I could watch a 75-second clip and walk away with about an 85% baked opinion that's going to be really hard to disprove, because I just know what deceptive behavior looks like. And so do people who have ever looked at it. Now, I did it in multiple fields. I didn't just do it as an FBI agent, and I didn't spend all that much time doing it there. I probably came into it like that. I'm probably built like that. My dad was in media for many years. My dad was in CBS, and the joke is that like I was probably in front of a microphone when I was 3 years old. But so by the time I'm doing like full sentences, they put me on a producer's lap who was saying things into a microphone in my ear, and I would repeat it back in, and they would cut it out on reel to reel. Like, yeah, legitimately, I was cutting promos for KCBS in the Bay Area in San Francisco when I was 3 and 4 years old.
Really?
Oh yeah, that's not an exaggeration. That's like legit. I did that.
Awesome. That's awesome.
I have a cassette tape of all the great promos we did over a couple years.
You should
Um,
put them out.
Back in the day, it was called News 74. It's 7:40 a.m. in San Francisco. It's the flagship of the CBS radio network there. It's KCBS. But back in the day, in the 80s, early 80s, they called News 74. That's what they went with, because it was 74 on the dial, because they didn't actually put the zeros on, because they were all analog dials, right? So kind of a throwback thing. But I grew up around radio stations and radio people are quirky and weird as shit. And like, they tend to be a really interesting read on like who people are and what they're about, especially because they do a lot off voice and they still make really good calls on stuff. So I was around characters and interesting people that were journalists in a real sense of it. They were trying to find truth, and skeptics. And so I spent a lot of time around that growing up. And then I was a paramedic for a couple of years, man. And so like, if you ever want to deal with like people who are being deceptive, go ask people about their medical history. I shit you not. Like, they are hiding their drug use from the cops that are also in the room because you're on an ambulance call. They are hiding the STDs that they might think they have because their spouse is there. They're hiding things just because it's embarrassing to talk about, like their whatever issues, and they have other people in the room. Man, I've done a lot of, not interrogations, but bedside medical histories. And you're constantly doing that Dr. House thing because everybody lies. Or they admit. Like, you'd ask people, like, are you taking any medications? And they're like, no. And you're like, okay, well, like, there's like 7 pill bottles in your jar, like on your dresser. And they're like, oh, I mean, I take my daily medications. I'm like, what the fuck did you think I just asked you, dude? Like, I just asked you if you're taking any meds every day. Well, I didn't, I thought you meant like if I was sick right now. It's like, no. I looked at you and you're 400 pounds. Like, I know that you have some diabetes. You're probably on metformin and you're on like some kind of blood pressure meds, and like you're on a statin. Like, what are you talking about, dude? So anyway, when you get used to diagnosing people, or working through that sort of like deceptive nature, then you start picking it up in other forms too. And people even reveal it online. You just see the way they interact, and you're like, that's an act. That's a fucking act. That's not how real people talk.
Well, on the flip side, I did all the stuff that I didn't have to get my hands dirty with. So I was trained as a litigator and a public defender in law school, and I ran in marketing and politics. And so that's all it took.
You can see it in transcripts.
Yes. Oh God, yeah. But one of the things that I learned very early on. So, well, not very early on. I'd say 12 years ago, before I was director of marketing for CPAC, I was director of marketing for Liberty Alliance, which was the largest conservative media firm in the country, and we built a lot of. That group built a lot of the major characters that you see today. Some of them fell off, but one of them was Matt Walsh. And I won't say that he behaved this way, but I know that a lot of people there, so they were fans. They were fanboys that ran this company. They had a very successful company. They built up all these Facebooks and social medias. The guys who ran it were brilliant in social media, but they were fanboys. And so they had these contracts that were, if you give us $5,000, you can get out the next month, right? Even though we're monetizing your shit. So the moment these guys started making $30,000 a month, we don't need you anymore. Bye. See ya. And they brought me in. It was almost a crisis comms position. I came in as their director of marketing and started doing their communications for them, because they bring me in and I start looking at these contracts after one person dipped and then another person dipped. Alan West was another one that dipped quick when he was making money back in the day, when he was a big name. And they were, talk about like, just didn't care about all the families and all the employees and all the people that built them up to make them who they were. These folks just cared about money and getting out of there. And I remember looking over the contracts. We had a board meeting, and the first one was like, yeah, he opted out for $5,000. It looks like the other one's going to do this. And I go, why did you write a contract like that? And they're like, well, these are good people.
Right.
And they would never, we didn't think they'd ever do anything like this. Very quickly. And they had to reinvent themselves. That company, I think it might still be around in some form, but they were on the top of the industry. And because they trusted these conservative people and these influencers and whatever, it all came crashing down in like literally the period of a month and a half.
Yeah. No, it goes fast. Here's the craziest thing. I'm a throwback because of this, because I actually believe in honor. Go figure. My dad built our house that I grew up in outside. So I used to live in Capel. So I used to live like right down the way
street.
From you.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, I was down off Beltline Road in Mockingbird.
Holy shit.
So you know where that is. It's close.
It's literally, you're really close to where the Salem headquarters is, actually.
Yes. So my dad knew the guys who started Salem, when they stepped out, and Tom Tradick was the senior VP over there, and he's recently retired, but he was the guy that helped stand that organization up. It was nothing at the time.
Yeah.
And they were like, they didn't have any terrestrial signal or anything. So he was doing that. He was with the ownership group that he ended up moving into Major League Sports. So he was working for the Texas Rangers when George Bush Jr. when George W. was part of the ownership group, and then it moved over to another group, and so he was with them. And so anyway, like he was in Dallas, like in a big way. I grew up in Dallas. I went to high school there at Jesuit and down by the Galleria. So Dallas was my stomping grounds. And my dad built a house that he came from California. We sold our house in California. It was a regular tract house, like in a neighborhood, a little gated community that wasn't anything special or anything exceptional. And we moved into this enormous house. It was 5,400 square feet. Because the amount of money you had to spend all the money that you sold in the old house, you'd lose it all in capital gains. So they came in and bought a house in Coppell when nobody was living there. Like there was 20,000 people living there. There's probably 100,000 now. And we moved into this thing, and they built that house, which was a custom deal, on a handshake. Literally, my dad shook hands with the builder, and they built the house, and then they bought the house. And it took him however long it did. And the guy put in all kinds of crazy money up front because he was doing this wild deal to meet the standard of the cost that came out of California, which was like, there was not even the same sport. It was so wildly different there. And so I had a similar deal. I had a deal in February of 2023. I sat down with a guy, and he said, we'd like to underwrite the podcast you have. We'd like to help you get going. I've never actually told the story, I don't think. And he said, we want to make sure that your family doesn't sink. We think what you're doing is important, and we think it's good. And so we want to be part of it. And I said, well, I don't know if I can live up to, like what's a lot of money? And he was like, we'd like to pay you $10,000 a month. And I was like, that's a life changer.
Yeah.
Because that was, roughly what I was making in the bureau. So you're going to pay me my old salary to go and sit and do a podcast where I had like 2,000 listeners tops, like on any given day. And he's like, yeah, we want to make sure that you float. And we're going to eventually come in and take over the podcast and put it onto our place. And so we had, and he goes, we'll write up a contract, we'll do this. And exactly what you're talking about. Like, we'll bulletproof it out. We'll have the attorneys read it over. And I looked at him and I said, listen, I'm kind of an old school guy, but like, you're a good person and I'm a good person. And if you want to shake hands on this and just not make like perfect the enemy of good enough, I'll do what I said I will do, and I'll be loyal, and I will be flexible with you, and I'll work in good faith if you want to do the same thing. You want to do that? And he was like, I do. So we shook hands over breakfast, and they paid me for 22 months.
Wow.
And I did what I said I would do, and I upped the number of outputs, and they had an ask of me, and I would show up, and if they had, requests, and if they wanted me to go do a fundraiser somewhere, I was 100% in, and I was like, look, you don't need to have it in a contract for me to be a good faith operator, because you're taking care of my family and you're helping me out, and I'm the same guy. But like, people are not like that.
No.
And the more you deal with people in the media space, you realize like people will stab you right in the heart. They'll look you in the eye and do it because they have no scruples whatsoever. And so more and more, I just want to deal with people that are like that would pay the $5,000 that you're talking about there for, what was it? Liberty Alliance.
Yeah.
I want them to see, listening.
Yeah.
I'd want to pay that $5,000 because I know I'm supporting a group, because that's the right thing to do, because they built what you are. And like the idea that people would walk away from that makes me kind of sick, because America used to be a better place.
Well, the deal was, I think it was like a 70-30 on rev share, right? So they literally handled everything. So when you're talking about like these guys making $30,000 a month and they pay the $5,000 to get out of it, I mean, it was such a scumbag deal because these guys have been built up to the point that, some of them were making, the whole website, and they're paying full teams that are doing all the graphics and everything you think of, and all the research and all the data and the buys, the ad buys and stuff like that.
Sure.
You're talking, I know some of those guys are making, let's say 60,000, and then they make 70 or 80% of that. And, the nickels that come back. Yes.
Yeah. That's a shitload of money.
And the nickels that come back were keeping that place open, and they were doing quite well, Liberty Alliance. And the 70% was going to the creator that everything was being created for. And like, they couldn't, I mean, honestly, they weren't even lifting a finger. Most of these guys were not lifting a single finger. They were just lending their image.
It's funny when people will accuse you of something, like you bought into your own hype or something like that, and you see all the people that have done it, and you're like, that sounds like projection. Like, look, I'm not a scientist in that field, but like, I married one who does, and she has a master's in that sort of thing. And so I can see what projection looks like, and we all know what it is. We've seen the Democrat Party do a lot of it. We've seen a lot of people in public space. They go out and accuse you of exactly what they're doing. I heard Elon say that the other day when he was talking to Hannity. That accusation where somebody sees their own guilt and they name it in somebody else, it's like, yeah, you're an expert in this, so I can imagine that you would see it, but that's not what's going on with me, bro. I don't buy my own hype. Like, I've been recognized in public like 2 or 3 times, and it's really, really weird because like, I'm not like, the one thing that I lost that I really, really treasured. And I'll tell you this is the biggest loss of all the things that happened. The house is whatever, you get another house. Like, I have somewhere to live. The income, it is that I did like having the badge and the gun, only because I like being able to carry a gun on an airplane. Like, that was the best part of being an FBI agent. If anybody wants to know, I carried an AR-15 in a backpack on an airplane wherever I went for my work. And that's badass. Like that's, and especially when there's like an anti-gun person who's like chirping in your ear, like assault rifles are the problem. And you're like, oh, are they really? Yeah, they're so dangerous. I've got a freaking SBR that's sitting like in between my legs right now with like 300 rounds of ammo in this bag. Like that's funny as hell. And I lost that. So I didn't like that. But the biggest thing that I lost was my anonymity. Because nobody could Google Kyle Seraphin before I went and sat down with Dan Bongino and talked on podcast. Nobody could. You know, like it's a special thing to be able to do that. And if you choose to be a public figure, that's a different animal.
Yeah.
You choose that. But I was 41 years old. I'd made some pretty specific choices not to. I didn't have a Facebook account. I didn't have any social media. I've actually got my shitty, lazy, like obnoxious, now retired, cowardly former boss from the FBI who's on Twitter that bitches at me. He's another person that's out there. He was bitching at me today and I was just laughing. I don't even respond to him. Like, bless your heart, John, you poor bastard. Like cowards die 1,000 deaths. And so like he's out there chirping at me. He's like, Kyle used to make fun of people with social media. It's like, no shit, dude. I did. I do think it's stupid, you know, but I don't have a choice. It's like, it's my business now. So my choice was shut my mouth, have the FBI kick in my door and drag me off. That was one possibility. Or like be really loud and make it so that it would be at least a real big question of why the hell are you kicking that guy's door down?
Yeah.
And that at least stalled them for 2 years and Donald Trump got in and thank God he did. And now Kash Patel is going to be the director of the FBI and thank God he will be.
Yeah, you know, I mean, going back to see, you keep making these heavy points, and then I can't, like, I feel like an asshole.
No, make points.
You're making fucking heavy points that are like very serious, and I'm like,
hey, this is the only way. I live in such a heavy space, Tim. Like everything around me is like super heavy to the point where it's just like it's comical how heavy it is.
Yeah, but seriously, like you're like, and by the way, and then you know, this was the strategy to keep the FBI from kicking my door down, and I'm like, oh, by the way, everybody in conservative media is a dickhead.
That's still true too. Those are both true.
But did you know? I mean, because I've worked for every major organization known to man. And the egos for people, and now we're in this generation of people, like you have actual real world experience. I, for being a mouthy guy, I worked my way through and I've advised a bunch of people. I've been in a bunch of executive agencies. I've done a bunch of shit. Mm-hmm. I never talk about it though, because I love being like, you know, the comedian or whatever bullshit. But I think that I'm going to be elevated here pretty soon. Yeah. But like, what'd you say?
Glib. You like to be glib.
Yeah, I like being glib. Yes, correct. I might know what that word means. But, you know, I have worked with these people, and now we have this generation that's coming up who have no real world experience, have no life experience, and they're going after each other. That's their big thing is drama with each other. Mm-hmm. Like we are now America's got it so good that on the conservative side, or they believe they've got it so good here that I don't give a shit who's pregnant. I don't give a shit who it's from. I don't care if so-and-so is paid by so-and-so or whatever. Like, show me someone like you. Show me someone like a Sean Duffy, these people who have had real world experience, who have represented in Congress, who are now doing hard work to change the culture. Those are the people that need to be elevated right now. And I'm so tired of it because I get invited because I'm an influencer, because I have a big audience on the internet.
I find that to be so offensive when someone calls me that. I'm like, dude,
but you know what? I'll take that sweet cash. You want me to push an idea? I'll take that sweet cash.
I should show people my 1099 from Twitter last year is just shy of $5,000, which is nothing to sniff at. Because getting paid $5,000 for having a Twitter account, it's not nothing. Because I would do it for free. Like I would pay to have it because it keeps the FBI from kicking my door down. Yeah. So that's what I did. But at the end of the day, like people were like, "Oh, you're out there for clicks." I'm like, "Fuck you, dude." Like if you knew how little I got paid a month, like I get like a couple $100. Like, yeah, I could shoot. That would be my ammo budget if I was being really honest. I just don't have time to go out and shoot as much as I want to. Like that's what I would use it for. One of your people just said this guy should have his own podcast. Surprise!
He knows. Shuck his dick.
Too funny. I liked it. I know he's 400 pounds of pure muscle. I saw.
He does. See, somebody was there. You go. He does. It's called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Listen, I got fans who are going to straighten you out. How dare you? So yeah,
you scumbag.
Thanks, Joe Ragu.
By the way, Joe Ragu says hello. I think it's Joe Rogan just with a fake name. He's really mixed it up there.
That's correct.
Yeah. But I'm just so tired of this. There's this generation that's coming up, and you know the thirst traps that will then get booked at CPAC because they're like, hey, somebody wants to fuck that, so we should put it on stage.
Oh, 100%.
I would love to hear what you have to say about the economy, woman who shoves guns in her cooch for clicks. I can't wait to find out what you think about that. Please give us detailed, information on how we should run the country.
Oh, tell us how to think. My favorite is that somebody said, one of my buddies reached out and he was like, hey dude, are you going to CPAC this year? And I'm like, I don't know what it is. I don't know where it is. And I could give two shits about it. And I was like, I went to AmFest, and what I saw was a bunch of women in slutty, sparkly things, and there was nothing conservative about it. And I was there with my pregnant wife, and all I wanted to do was go back and hang out with my kids. Because call me crazy, like somebody offered me another opportunity in the last couple of days, and I've got to reach out and make a decision. But the odds are I'm not going to do it because it's going to take me away from my kids, and I don't want to do that. I would rather make less money, have less everything, and still be able to like kiss my kids goodnight and watch my kids. Like my 18-month-old ran into my 4-year-old full speed just before we went live. And so he was sitting there and crying, and he was holding his cheek, and the little one is just starting to speak. And she's like, it's my mouth. She's like trying to tell me like she got hit in the mouth and he got hit in the cheek. The two of them just smashed each other. And I'd rather be there with my crying like toddler / preschooler and the little midget that runs around in the house. That's way more interesting to me than hanging out with the people that are the thirst trap, let's take a duck face selfie shit. I have 0 selfies with any cool people I've ever met. I will share you the funniest story of someone I met.
By the way, hold on. I'm going to interrupt you for 2 things. One, really, Kyle, you have to admit Trump is what we need now. His administration hit the ground running. He said he agrees with
I voted for Trump. I voted for Trump for a lot of reasons.
There we go.
The biggest reason I voted for Trump was because I have friends who needed pardons, and he did it, and I was shocked that he did it so fast. Like, I'm so thankful. I told people I didn't even think we were having an election, and it was the happiest thing I've ever been wrong about. And I said it first thing on the podcast the next morning. I was like, thank God that I was wrong. I believed so grateful for being wrong about that.
I believed he was going to win if there wasn't cheating, or there wasn't enough cheating. And so I
didn't even know we were going to have an election, man. I'm dead serious. Like all the indicators were, how did you look at these people? And maybe they just were deluded, but I think there's something actually more nefarious there. I looked at what was going on, and I said, these people are driving full speed off the cliff. They are batshit crazy. They've done everything they can to both put the guy in jail, tie him up financially, and then actually physically kill him, which is insane. And we're not even still talking about what happened in Butler, PA, which changed the world forever for this adult population. And it's not even a big topic. Like, they went back to saying we have to fight and we need to get this guy off the map. The next fucking day, these people said that shit. Yep. And you're looking at it going like, what planet are we living on? And so I was watching that, and I was like, there's no way that they're going to be able to have an election, because he walked out and his native instinct, and this is something that I didn't know about Donald Trump, and he didn't know about himself. Because you never know this about yourself until you face a near-death moment. And I know that from facing a near-death moment. I had a funny moment where one of my buddies pulled me off I was rock climbing, and I was like 20 feet above my protection, and I was working to get to the next thing, and he pulled me off the wall, and I fell like 30 feet. It was scary as shit. I banged against it. I'm all scratched and all fucked up, and he lowers me down, and he's like, hey, dude, good news and bad news. And he's like my best friend. He introduced me to my wife. We've known each other since 7th grade. He used to live actually like not far from you. And he's like, hey, dude, good news and bad news. And I was like, oh, yeah, what's that? And he's like, the bad news is like, you're all fucked up. You got like blood on your face and your arms, and you're like, oh, you look terrible. And I was like, he's like, you got a rock stuck in your arm. I need to pull that out in a minute. And I was like, oh yeah, good. Okay. I was like, so what's the good news? And he was like, the good news is that when you fall to your death, you don't sound like a bitch. You sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I was like, what, dude? And he's like, yeah, dude, did you hear yourself scream when you fell down? And I was like, no. And he was like, you're like, he's like, you were like so beastly and masculine when you fell. Everybody looked at you and were like, that dude is falling hard. And Donald Trump had that moment. He got clipped in the ear, got dropped to the ground, probably was thinking like the entire world going. And his first thought was, I've got to tell people I'm okay. And he popped up, like, which is not super smart or safe, but it is a masculine move.
Oh yeah.
And it's like that's like Rocky level shit. That's what I said the next day too. I was like, this is a Rocky level, like, strip away. You want to talk about reveal the man versus like makes the man. That's a reveal the man moment. You can't help it. It revealed that his undercurrent is he thought about other people, which is not what people would think about Donald Trump. They think he's very narcissistic and self-centered. And I knew this from there. I was like, holy I mean, I'm like, my wife was in tears when we saw the videos the night, the day before, or the Saturday or whatever it was. He popped up and he went like, fight, fight, fight. And I don't care about the words because they're irrelevant. It's the gesture and the action that he thought about. My fans, the people that are in America, need to know that I'm okay. And so he did that. Yeah. And he did a defiant gesture, like, you're not going to put me down. And so all of that says something very, very important. And the media walked away from it. And they were like, oh, he collapsed on stage. Like, fuck you, CNN, with that lying shit. And you watch it and you're like, these dishonest. So I saw all that and I'm like, there's no way they let this guy win. There's no way they can't steal it. And then I talked to my mother-in-law and she was like, oh, thank God he won though. And I was like, yeah, because if it didn't, like, I think this country would have broken in half and all the people with the guns would have been on the other half.
Hey, at least Yeah, I know. At least you would have been arrested before me, and that's
I had attorneys that were like, "Hey, we'll have to work out a retainer situation," but I had two criminal attorneys, people who you've heard of, guaranteed you heard of them, and I reached out to them and I was like, "What?"
well, if one is MD, he's awesome. I don't know if that's one of them, but if
That was not one of them, although I know I have access to him as well. So
love that guy. Love that guy. After you just talked about Trump there, I can tell why people think you hate him.
Yeah, that's exactly what people always say about me. Anybody who's ever listened to me thinks that they're like, that Kyle Seraphin, he really hates Trump. He's such an asshole.
I could tell just from that there where you were like, you could tell he was a man and he stood up. Also, by the way,
I just say what I think, man. How weird is that?
To poke a hole in your story, he did do one thing before he stood up and yelled, "Fight, fight, fight."
He looked for his shoe.
He looked for his shoes.
Now, here's the thing. If you've ever been around people that have been in really, really crisis situations, they often do things that are completely illogical because they have a pattern of, they have like this, what they call the OODA loop, right? It's your decision and your operation and your decision, your action orientation. And I just messed up the words, but it's OODA. And the OODA loop, when it's been disrupted, like you have a plan, people do illogical things almost immediately, all the time when they're put into situations like that. And looking for your shoe, or like making sure that your pants are buckled, or like something in a moment when you should be trying to figure out like, what's my fight for my life look like? If you've never prepped for that moment, I guarantee you he's never done that drill before.
I mean, the other side of it too, like, he saw his own blood. He felt it. He knew that when he was down, because I clipped one of my ears once, my little ears, and blood comes out of your ears like a motherfucker. When you
head bleed dramatically.
That's why they cut their in pro wrestling, they blade along their hairline, and then it bleeds like crazy. But like, he saw his own blood. He knew what was going on, and still that was his reaction to do that. The guy, like, I think that changed America and the world in one moment. And the craziest part to me of the whole thing. So we were at the we were bougie. We were at the All-Star game. It was here in it was the All-Star Futures game at the Texas Rangers Stadium. Because I'm famous and influential and powerful. We get tickets to things. And
that checks, yeah.
And everyone's on their phone watching it. Everyone, the whole stadium, everybody's on the phone watching it.
Sure.
If this was any other generation, if it was any other time in history, there would have been an announcement from the announcer.
And a moment of silence and a prayer.
Yes.
The same way they did when the fucking Challenger blew up.
Yes.
Like, I remember that.
Yeah.
Everybody dropped to their knees.
Yes.
Because America used to be a country that understood that there was a nation under God. And that wasn't offensive to people.
And I'll
and
never,
nobody cared if you didn't, it's like, you don't believe in God, who cares? Like, we're all praying right now because somebody just got shot and it was the president. Like, they did that for Kennedy.
That was my first thought the entire time was like, everyone, and it's all conservatives that are there because they're the only people who can afford the tickets and they like baseball.
It's like having a boat. If you go out on a boat, like, it's all conservatives too.
Yeah, you meet the guys who own bourbon companies and shit like that too. Anybody who owns like bourbon, cigars, also. But everybody's on their phone watching it. Like, literally the entire stadium on their phone. You couldn't go anywhere. You saw it. And not a single announcement. They pretended like nothing happened. And I'm like, holy shit, where are we as a country? Because I mean, like you said, like it Challenger, everybody stopped. When Kennedy,
I don't care what political party you're in.
Yes.
An assassination attempt of a potential president is objectively bad for everyone. Like, and if you don't know that, you're so detached from reality that there's probably no bringing you back, right? Like, not in short order. If you don't realize that, and that is why the left is going to lose for a little while now. They're going to be in a cycle because they have affirmed that there's a moral argument, and the argument is you're a bad person if you don't agree with us. And that is a fucked up way to operate. That is not a way that you convince. I can't convince any of those people, but occasionally I can ask them questions that make them like self-realize. That's my favorite game, is like doing Socratic stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the skeptic. If you're smart, you just ask questions. You're never going to like beat somebody into your opinion. But I will give you the questions. It's like, why do you think that way? Where did those thought processes come from? How did you decide that was the correct answer?
We got very serious throughout this, and I've loved this conversation. But I need to do 2 questions for you before we go.
Good. I hope they're super serious.
They actually kind of are. Okay. I don't know. I want your take on these guys. Because my whole thing is I think it's an inside fucking thing, and you can tell me I'm wrong. But I just have the sneaky suspicion Patriot Front is going to disappear now that Kash Patel's been confirmed as director of the FBI. What do you think about that?
I don't think so, no. So I know enough about them, and I'll give people an opportunity. If they want to go listen to, it's the most crappy video and lighting, but they should go listen to a podcast that I did from Las Vegas and SHOT Show, where we had a FBI whistleblower come in, and it's me and Joe Altman, and we're talking to Zach Shovstall. And he was the supervisor of the Coeur d'Alene RA, which is the resident agency, the satellite office. It functions out of Utah, but it's in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where those guys got arrested. You remember 31 of them got arrested in Idaho?
Yeah. Yeah.
Zach was the supervisor who got fired over refusing to do an FBI search warrant. He refused to make his guys sign off on a search warrant where there was no probable cause. And he reveals the backstory on these, which I've known for a couple of years now. And the fact of the matter is that the FBI has already adjudicated that these guys have a nonviolent, it's not a manifesto. What the hell? I mean, the manifesto is also nonviolent. It's actually like, it's white nationalisty, racist nonsense, but it's not like overtly. I've read their manifesto probably like a half dozen times. These guys were at the March for Life in 2019.
They were there this year.
They're there a lot. They were there in 2019 when Donald Trump was there. So my wife and I went to that when I was in DC. She took me to that for the first time. And they were there as well. And everybody looked at them and like, oh, those guys are weirdos. Like they're wearing the masks. They got the flag. They look patriot-y, but they're just bullshit. The FBI investigated them very thoroughly and attempted to find any nexus to violence, which is the only way that they're going to be able to build a case on them. But because these guys have a pledge of nonviolence that's part of their organization, they've basically written off investigating them in any meaningful way. And that's why they don't do anything about them, because these guys are doing things that are First Amendment protected. Now, could they be an op that is being run by some like HSI or some sort of DHS? They don't have the same rules as the FBI does, but I would very, very highly doubt that they are being run by any DOJ entity, specifically because the FBI is not interested in them, and not because they're us kind of thing, but they're not interested in them because there's no case there. So let me break this piece out for people to understand. The FBI deals with terrorist organizations or deals with a white supremacy organization for one reason and one reason alone. It is a means to an end. The information op is not a useful thing for the FBI to get paid out on. There is an actual paid out option when we're talking about what goes on in these types of operations where you're trying to move people towards a terrorist activity. What they want is sophisticated techniques, so justification for putting in confidential human sources or undercovers. They want a justification for getting a Title III wiretap, if there's a reason for that. They want a justification for being able to run infiltrations, and then they need to set them up in some sort of a material act, or they need to generate a lot of what are called IIRs, which are information or intelligence products that go out for everybody to read in the intel community. If they're not generating IIRs, if they're not generating dismantlements or disruptions or sophisticated techniques all the time, then there's no upside to it. And the reason that the FBI executive want them to do these things, you do all those sophisticated techniques so that every year they can say, we got X number of sophisticated, we got X number of UCs, we got X number of this. They get paid out like a 5-figure bonus at the end of the year, like $30, $40, $50,000 as the head of the field office. So they want to be able to run these ops to be able to do that. So there is an incentive for them. It's not like the FBI has like a political motivation. It's really not political. In fact, even going after the J6ers, it was just easy money. It was like an opportunity to be sycophantic to Biden, and they do have that sympathy on the upper echelons. But moreover, it was a really easy way to get a bunch of prosecutions that were going to check all the marks without a lot of work. And so they did that. And so like for people to think that the FBI was like, they're targeting conservatives. No, they were still setting up and fucking over BLM people in 2020 and in 2021. And if you want to read this has been going on for 25 years. The book I recommend is called The Terror Factory. It's like 13 years old at this point, or 11 years old. It's written by Trevor Aronson, who's not a righty. But the story he's saying, when you read what they did to jihadis or fake jihadis is what they really were, it's the exact same story that Dinesh D'Souza told in the movie Police State, which I had a big chunk in. I helped write basically all the dialogue between any of the characters that are in the reenactment. That's all my words. And we helped reenact all of the scenes, in fact, all the SWAT team scenes and stuff like that, where they kick down the door in the house. That's me and Steve Friend coming in, wearing masks. And we did all the arrest operations because we wanted it to look real. We wanted people to understand how real this is. And so I was like, look, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it the right way so that it looks legit and it doesn't look like some bullshit where people are flagging each other and, not handling weapons properly. So they've been doing this for 20 years. And so the movement to be able to set people up and take them from, I'm interested in a really stupid idea, to I'm arrested by the feds and I'm going to be paraded out as a terrorist or a white supremacist, or take your pick, that is a well-oiled machine. The Terror Factory is what Aronson calls it. If you want to watch the 15-minute TED Talk version, you can do that too. It's got 1 million+ views. So that'll give you the brief of what the book is about. But I recommend that to everybody. Understand that this is not about conservative or liberal or leftist or take your pick. It's not about ideology. It's about opportunity. And the FBI is the simplest organization in the world. It functions not on those things, but how do we get our metrics? Imagine if somebody said, you got to go get 50 tickets written and you're a cop. you're going to pull over the first 50 people you can and get the quota done. They do it the same way. Patriot Front to me will still be around. They'll still be doing some bullshit a-hole things, but what you probably will see is less of the media interested in it. Or maybe even they'll say it more because now it's the era of Trump again.
Oh, yeah.
So Trump is empowering these people. I think they're going to stick around. And by the way, I think they dress like feds, which they do dress like you wear the uniform at Quantico, specifically because they get called feds and it's free publicity. And they do get recruits out of that stuff. And if you guys want to hear 4 hours of someone talking about it,
I'll stop fucking tweeting about it, Kyle. Thanks, because I always yell Fed when I see him. So
people who know better still do it too. Like J. Michael Waller is very, very bright and has worked in the Intel sphere for a very long time. He wrote the book Big Intel, and he's totally dialed in. And we've had this conversation, and he still calls them feds because it's still fun to do.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm accountable for everything that I say, and I better be able to back it up. And if I make a claim about something that's bullshit feds, I better be able to back it up. And in this case, I can back up that it's not because I've talked to the people who've lost their jobs over it. And look, losing your job over a white supremacist, that is a ballsy move. That is a really true test of a legitimate person who believes in the Constitution. And Zach is that man. And so if you want to hear his story, and he and I don't agree on everything politically, and we don't even agree on the way that the FBI needs to be treated, and we can still be friendly because at the end of the day, I know he's an honest, good person, and he showed up and he did the right thing when someone said, hey, just sign this unconstitutional search warrant with no probable cause. And he said, I'm not going to do that, to the point where he lost his job. And he was in for 16 years. He was 4 from retirement, and they dicked him over hard. So if people want to listen to that interview, it'll open your eyes. They really will.
All right, last one, and then we'll get out of here. These people, what's going to happen with these people? Are they going to quit? Who are these people? Are these actual field agents, or are these people who push papers in the office? That's my first.
Yeah, Becca's in there. There's Sarah Linton. There's Amy Oakes. Like, I know all these people. Yeah. Are you shitting me? Like, I worked with these people. Did you know that I knew that?
No, I didn't know you were going to start dropping names.
Yeah, I don't give a shit. So Amy's sitting in the back there she's the Asian gal with the mask on. She's the supervisor of the cybersecurity squad that does counterintelligence at Washington Field. There's Sarah Linden. She just became the deputy assistant director of counterintelligence. So she's working against the Russian threat right now. The heavy set girl that weighs like 200 pounds more than she should. She was a supervisor at that time. Then she got promoted like 4 times since then. Yeah, I know all these people. I worked with them, and I don't know what's going to happen to them. The senior executives that got promoted, they should all lose that job. Like they massively fucked up. That is a big mistake. And what happened, and people don't realize this, but I was there the day that happened. I was out doing something else in a different part of the city, and then the next day I got called into the office and we all got yelled at. And I felt like I was getting yelled at specifically because I was looking at the woman saying it like she had a dick growing out of her forehead, because the thing she was saying was crazy. She was like, these people did the right thing. And I'd already seen the videos that there was nobody near them. They had 50 yards of clearance, and you've got 14 armed federal agents there in body armor. Like, are you shitting me? And these people were just standing there. They were a bunch of BLM, like going like, kneel with us, like stand with us, brothers, or whatever dumb shit they say. So the woman's name is Larissa Knapp. Okay. And Larissa Knapp was the special agent in charge of counterterrorism at the Washington Field office. She came in and held a meeting, and she took it upon herself to go directly to Chris Wray and say these people did the right thing and they saved lives and they de-escalated the situation before she had all the facts. She gave them all hugs. I know that for a fact too. She hugged Sarah Linton in front of me. And then she's like yelling at us that like anybody who says anything about these people is wrong, and they made the mistake. And so the Bureau like encircled them. The FBI Agents Association gave each one of them $100 gift card.
Oh.
To like Applebee's or something crazy. Like,
well, that one doesn't need the Applebee's gift card, I can tell you.
No, nobody needed it. And honestly, I don't think they legally could do that, but they all did that. You can read, James Gagliano wrote a piece about this in the New York Post at the time. He went and validated my claim that there was a gift card exchange. He found out about that and was furious because he was on HRT and those guys did some heroic missions and they never got a gift card for anything they ever did. So all of this stuff was a reveal moment. It was a mask off moment for the senior members of the FBI that were involved in it. So anybody, and the comms are going to be available to someone like Kash Patel if he wants to go and look for it. He can find out the people that were involved in this, and anybody that was promoted over it or that said like, they truly sympathize with his ideology and they did it for that reason. Some of them need to be re-educated about what it is that you can and can't do while you're wearing not a uniform, because there is no uniform, but while you're wearing the FBI's colors out. You need to be a good steward of that. This is a tactically dangerous position as well. This is one of the most dangerous things you could do. Drop a knee and surrender the physical tactical advantage to a riotous crowd when you're armed. That's a great way for someone to get killed.
Yeah.
And so everything about this, and like, look, you'll also notice there's a huge chunk of them are females. There's a real problem with hiring female, non-aggressive, wrong people. I met exactly two female agents that I would work with and turn my back on if they drew their gun. Two of them. It is not a thing that I think is very safe, generally speaking. And so a lot of the women that got hired, if they want to be indoor dogs and not carry a gun and not go out and put themselves in a situation where someone might yell at them and be mean and have bad breath or whatever, then they need to stay indoors and be analysts. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to be a special agent and carry a gun and wear a badge and go affect the arrest of bad people and potentially have to fight for your life, you better be at least as capable as me. I'm not a big guy. I'm hyper aggressive and hyper violent if I have to be, but like I know what my limits are. I'm still never going to surrender to that. And the fact that they chose to do that and nobody was pushing them on it, there should be consequences because it's a massive black eye for the FBI. Like everybody shows this picture every single time. We call him either Neil Team 6 or the big girl. We call her Neil Team 6, Meal Team 6. Sarah Linton, the Meal Team, in and of herself. And, you know, that has to be righted because Americans saw this. And a lot of people who looked out there said, look, obviously they're partisan. And now I don't think that's true. I don't think the FBI is actually a partisan organization, even though the people that were leading it were running it down that road.
Yeah.
But man, you got to correct this because this is a disgusting, unforced error image, like a PR nightmare that has never been corrected. And it's now 4 years old, so it's aged and it smells as bad as it did the first day.
Yeah, I mean, this was, I wasn't the only one, obviously, who posted this today. Tons of people posted this today, and you're right. It's never been corrected for, and there is a major, major PR issue with the FBI right now that hopefully Kash will be able to fix.
I think that he's got two things that are in front of him. He has a hostile takeover, the same way that Donald Trump is facing with the entire government and what Doge is doing and the other things. There's a hostile takeover that's obviously in front of them. And the second thing is they have a counterinsurgency that they're having to operate because they have to win the hearts and minds of people who are now distrustful and worried that just because they work for that organization, they're going to be looked at unfavorably. And that's going to be the hardest piece. You're going to have to get people who are otherwise sympathetic to know that they're not on the chopping block. What I will tell you is that I've had multiple agents reach out to me today who said that they're thrilled and that they had their phones blowing up with people that they didn't even know were following this that are also thrilled. So the people that lock up bad guys in the FBI are not worried about losing their jobs. And those are the people that need to go back to doing the work. And like, I'm the happiest guy in the world if they said, hey, tomorrow they're going to shut off the lights and turn the FBI off forever. I'd be like, good. Yeah, good. We could do without it. We could find another way to exist. There's no question in my mind. And anybody who argues otherwise doesn't understand the nature of the problem. But there is going to have to be probably some capabilities for counterintelligence and for counterterrorism. And there has to be a national security apparatus. So if it's going to be the FBI and it's going to be run by a Kash Patel, it needs to be run like exactly what we talked about earlier with the January 6th things. There needs to be allegations or information of a federal crime. We can't just have people opening cases because somebody met with a Chinese guy or because somebody went to a Patriot Front rally, because that's not a crime. It's just not. And it's never going to be a crime. So we need people that understand what the Constitution is first. And every one of those people should be willing to lose their job for like being told to do something illegal, the way that Zach was and the way that I was and Garrett and Steve Friend and some others.
Well, I'm going to have to agree with Shuck somewhere in the middle of all of his bullshit comments tonight. You carried the show. I think this was incredible. This was an incredible talk with you. Very enlightening to me. I have really enjoyed this. And also, I have to tell you, I think the internet trolls are right. You are a Trump. You hate Trump. It's very clear. You don't respect him. You obviously are a deep state government shill. Mm-hmm. Actually, no, in reality, I really like you, man. And I've never had this thorough of a conversation with you. Obviously, we talk on the back end of Twitter all the time because I'm bought and paid for, obviously, as well. And I really enjoyed this, and I could listen to you talk about this all day long. That's why, like, you can tell if there are different ways that I treat guests a lot of times, and I do this on radio too. If I really like what's going on, I just kind of let you go, and there's no reason to interrupt when I'm actually sitting back and learning and really enjoyed it. And so everyone should be paying attention to your podcast as well over Kyle Seraphin over on Rumble, and then you also push it on X as well, right?
I sure do. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you giving me a lot of leeway and a lot of leash. Obviously, I don't mind talking. I like listening too when people come on and they have a story. The same way, it's like, when it's my show and I bring somebody on, I want to hear what they have to say. When people bring me on to they call the fastball, I'll throw you the fast. If you throw me the changeup, I'll give you the changeup too. I don't mind doing that too. But thanks for giving me like a lot of leash to run on, because every time people hear this, they go like, "Huh, I didn't know that." And mostly, I want to educate people because it's their fucking tax dollars that are going down the drain. Like you're all paying for this. You paid for your own tyranny, folks. You did. And so if you don't know what it is, there's no way you're going to be able to like cheer for the correction of it. And so that's the biggest piece for me is like, how do we educate so we can solve the problem and know what the actual scope is?
Well, I'm really glad that obviously you're on the media and the trolls can't figure out what you are, because obviously NBC said that you're a guy that's a Trump guy that supports Kash Patel,
I know.
and then everybody else says that you're a terrible deep stater that supports the FBI. So here's the thing. I think people should be judged basically just by their own thing, and by their honesty and what they say, and also, the internet isn't real, so who gives a shit with the trolls on the internet who don't have?
I just think if I'm making people on both sides of the political aisle mad, that I'm a reasonable person that sits in the middle. I'm like a 1990s guy.
Yeah.
And I really am. It's like in the 1990s, like Bill Clinton, if you took Bill Clinton out of the 1990s and put him into the 2025 America, he would be a right winger.
Oh, yeah.
And so like I'm more conservative than Bill Clinton, and I don't want to have like affairs with a cigar with some underage gal in my office. But what I do understand is that there is a right and a wrong. There is a morality. I do hold myself to my own principles and standards. I try to actually live by them. And like occasionally I'm wrong too, and that's okay too. I don't mind being wrong. When people point out, they're like, "Hey, you got this fact wrong." I'm like, "You're damn right I did." Like, thank you. I don't claim to know everything, but what I do know things about, like I'm pretty passionate about it because, like I said, it upended my life in a pretty meaningful way. So if I'm not out there telling people what happened and how to avoid it, then what the hell am I doing for my kids? So that's it. Again, big thanks for sharing the audience with me, sharing the time and the mic and all that, and thanks for giving me a hard time because I enjoy that too.
Listen, I like the '90s as well, because back in the day, remember, it was very shocking to ask Bill Clinton boxers of briefs, and now most women who show their camel toes the most on Instagram get main stage speaking spots at CPAC. So I enjoy CPAC if you're there, guys. Great work, everybody, and make sure the head of it keeps its hands above the table when you hang out. All right. Kyle, good hanging out. Hang on here for a second. I'm going to close the stream, guys. Thanks for being here. Make sure you hit the retweet button. Go visit kalshi.com/Timmy, and of course the Veebs app, where I'm the CEO of Veebs. You can go there and download the app, Veebs app, and scan UPC codes. When you go to the store, it tells you if the product is conservative or liberal. We have done all of the research on the parent companies, and then give you alternatives. If you don't like the product being liberal, you can go find a conservative alternative to your potato chips or your ice cream. Really not hard to do. Veebsapp.com. Go download it now. All right. Thanks for being here tonight, guys. Kyle,